I kind of want to just hear you say it. So you seem incredibly impressed by its ability to do the work that it does. Would you actually label it as a critical thinking entity?
Um, just in the last couple of days or so, I've started reevaluating my position on this. And I'm thinking, well, there's an off chance, just an off chance, that perhaps it can do more than I initially thought that it can do.
Welcome to the neutral ground. ChatGPT has become a topic of great concern recently. It's been classified as everything from an interesting tool to be used in education to ushering in the beginning of the end of humanity. Where do I sit on this topic? Well, I think by the end of this episode, you'll probably have a sense of that. However, I admit that when I first tried ChatGPT, I didn't quite know what to make of it. That's when I came across the work of my guest, Dr. Teo Susnjak. When I went looking for research, Teo's work provided me with some really important information, not only about some of the potential concerns that we have as educators, but also some of the concerns that we might have as a people. Teo Susnjak is a senior lecturer, assistant professor in computer science and IT at Massey University in New Zealand, where he teaches courses in data science. His research background is in machine learning, with a focus on applying it to real world problems such as developing New Zealand's first real time GDP and inflation tracker, as well as predictive models for identifying at risk students at his university. Recently, he has been interested in exploring the potential implications of ChatGPT for the education sector. Today, we're going to be talking about his article, ChatGPT, The End of Online Exam Integrity. We'll talk about our concerns, our excitement, and we'll even get into the ethics of online examinations and proctoring. This was a fascinating discussion. If you want to support our efforts to bring civility back to the mainstream, hit the subscribe/follow button, leave a kind comment or rating for me and my guest, and consider sharing the program with a friend. I hope you enjoy my conversation with Dr. Teo Susnjak. Teo, welcome to the neutral ground. Now, we're going to be discussing what is really quite a complex topic today, ChatGPT by OpenAI and its potential impact on education. We're going to make our way into that discussion through your article, ChatGPT, The End of Online Exam Integrity. Now, I think your article serves as a really good primer for why there are very real, legitimate concerns about the future of education and AI generated texts. But let's begin first by kind of getting a basic understanding for what ChatGPT is and isn't, because I'm not sure that everybody is sort of aware of what it is. So, how do you categorize or think about ChatGPT?
So, first of all, thank you for the invitation. ChatGPT is an AI technology and it was released 2 months ago, so it's fairly new. It is what we call a neural network that's been developed by deep learning algorithms. And it belongs in a class of technologies we also call large language models. Now, there is a hint in that name in terms of what it does. It's about language, it's about understanding human language and generating responses based off of that. So, this large language model has been trained, it has been created essentially on everything that's been written. It has read every single book that's out there, it's read every single web page, everything that's on Wikipedia, all the academic articles that are not behind a paywall. It's seen. So it has a phenomenal amount of knowledge to draw its responses from, but it also has the ability to express everything in grammar that is correct. So this is what ChatGPT is in essence. One of the innovations that they did with ChatGPT is that it also has these conversational qualities to it that previous iterations did not have. So it's able to have a conversation that is coherent for a fairly long period of time. without losing coherence and starting to ramble. Now, one of the innovations with these large language models is that the intention was initially to create a model that understands language and is able to speak correctly. But as a byproduct of having had read and seen all these texts, it's also acquired this knowledge. And so, one of the most exciting things about this technology is that we're not able to just have trivial conversations with a chatbot, but we're able to get it to write essays. We're able to get it to write letters, business strategy plans, and we're also able to get it to answer exam questions. Now, how do I use this technology and how has it changed my life? It's been quite profound, I think, in my experience, because I've seen that you can actually use a technology like this to co-pilot, and I like the word co-pilot, to co-pilot your creativity. It's helping me to sort of get a lot of my admin work done easily with very little effort. Um, I was sitting down filling out forms at work that would normally take me about 2 to 3 hours to get done. It was a whole lot of text that I had to describe projects, go into great details, um, describe some of the protocols. Well, I managed to get that work done in 20 minutes. And I felt a little bit naughty at the end of the task because I felt like the system required a certain amount of flesh from me, a pound of flesh that I didn't give it. It required a sacrifice of 2 to 3 hours that I didn't give it. And I felt kind of energized at the end that I could actually continue on the rest of my day being productive. So there are lots of little tasks that this can make a profound difference on.
You know what I love about this initial answer is, so there's quite a lot of anxiety surrounding this software, and what it might represent to some and what it might represent to others in terms of the future of humanity, even, but at the same time, I like the idea that you're thinking about it also as, look, it's also a tool. It's a tool that we can use to kind of help us organize information. And look, let's be honest, there are definitely days when we just don't have that clarity of mind to produce even something as simple as a paragraph, without really struggling and then making it worse, and we've got to take a break and come back. But this software can actually help co-pilot, and I like that idea as well. We can have this with us to use to kind of help make those processes a little easier, a little less daunting, more manageable. So I'm glad that we're going to get into, I think, some positives toward the end here a little bit, that I think can really help maybe ease some of the anxiety that I think some people are feeling. Okay, so in terms of your study then itself with this article, we're dealing with this idea of online environments, test taking, and ethics. And so let me ask you this. What were the circumstances that led you to pursue this study of ChatGPT and online exam ethics? Was there a particular moment or particular concerns that interested you right away?
So what happened was the technology was released on the 30th of November, and I happened to be in a little bit of a monk mode in the first week of December. I was working on some research articles and reviews and so forth, and so I kind of died to the world. And towards the end of the first week, I ended up getting a phone call from a local radio station, and they wanted to interview me and get my thoughts on ChatGPT. And I missed the announcement. I didn't know that it was released because I had my head down. And so I organized to have an interview with the radio station a couple of days in advance. And I started looking at this technology. I started playing around with it. And one of the first things I decided to do, I don't know why, was I thought I'd test it out with the most difficult exam question that I have in one of my courses in machine learning. And it answered it perfectly. This is a fairly advanced question, and it gave an answer that wasn't only as good as what I would expect from my top students, it was better. And it was at that moment that it just freaked me out because I realized that I would have to teach in a few months' time. And my exams have all gone online. We had all been given instructions that our exam questions now need to become more about critical thinking, less about just information and facts retrieval, because that's just too easy to do with Google search. And I realized we have a problem on our hands. Straight away, I knew this is now going to become an issue and this needs to be raised. I was looking around to see, is anybody talking about this? And I didn't really see anybody talk about it. So I decided to do a little bit more of an examination, do a little bit more of an experiment, and try and bring this to light. The unfortunate thing was that everybody at my end was going into annual leave. Everybody was shutting down for Christmas. And so it felt like, oh my goodness, nothing's going to be done, at least at my end, until sort of early January. And then all the stories started to break out about it across the world. So that was really my entry into it. That first question, the very first question that I decided to pose to it was, give me an answer to this question for my exam. And that's when I slightly freaked out. I was elated at the same time, I should say. I was incredibly excited, but I knew we had a problem.
So, just a quick follow up to that. If you can recall, when you put that question in, were you expecting it to kind of fail and to give you something that was a little bit gobbledygook? Were you genuinely surprised by that answer?
I was expecting it to fail because the, the question included a scenario. I asked it, imagine this kind of a problem and you're put into this kind of a context. What kinds of things might be going wrong, which you would go about in formulating a solution? This was very much high level thinking. I was expecting it to completely flunk out and not even understand the question, let alone produce what it produced. So it did completely excel my expectations.
So then you come back from that and you're thinking to yourself, I've got to learn more about this to really better understand what, if anything, I should be doing maybe differently. And you think about this study, you begin to think about what you want to do here. What were your aims for the study initially? What did you want to uncover? What did you want to really learn about?
I wanted to see whether or not it was, well, there were four things I wanted to see in the study. I really wanted to sort of stretch the system and see how far is it able to do critical thinking. And so what I did was I formulated a fairly simplistic methodology. I asked ChatGPT, come up, number one, come up with a very difficult question that would be appropriate for undergraduate students in four different subject areas. So I asked it for machine learning, I asked it for education, history, and marketing. And then I asked it to give me a rationale. Why did you choose this question? Why is it an appropriate question for undergraduates? Then I asked it, right, now give me an answer to this question using 500 words. And then what I asked it to do was, now critique yourself. Show me if you're able to do some self reflection. Tell me what is good about the response that you've given me. Tell me what's bad about it and suggest how you would improve it. And I thought using that kind of a simple strategy, I'd be able to really push the system, stretch it, and see what it's capable of doing. And I think in the study, and it's just a first step in an investigation, I managed to sort of uncover that. It's pretty good. It's more than good. It's very impressive.
When you were reviewing the literature that was already there about online exam integrity, did you find legitimate concerns already in terms of trying to push back against cheating in online environments, or did you find it was more much ado about nothing?
So my literature review found that, unsurprisingly, academics have been raising the issue of cheating more and more. This is an increasing issue for all of us. Um, Nobody has been able to put a finger on what is the exact percentage of cheating that goes on. Of course, it's different across different institutions, across different cohorts, and so forth. Some numbers that I've seen have been incredibly high, up to 75% reported cheating. That is just absurd. Or perhaps it's true in this context. We also know that contract cheating is $1 billion industry. So we know that this is a problem, and it has been an increasing problem. And now that we have moved more and more onto online teaching modes, and now that more of our examinations have moved onto the online mode as well, um, we have now come to a point in time where we have a serious problem in the context of chat GPT as well. Um, some of the solutions that have been proposed are proctoring software, but it has its pluses and its minuses. A lot of students report that they're able to cheat despite the proctoring software being installed. Other students will say that it's far too invasive on their privacy and they feel stressed out. And why wouldn't you? It's like 1984. You have a camera that's constantly recording you. It's very unsettling. There are some jurisdictions, especially you're in the United States, that have struck down the use of proctoring software. It's too much of an invasion on privacy and so forth. And so this is not necessarily a perfect solution going forward. And this is why a lot of universities have been suggesting or advising the academics to bring in critical thinking questions into their online exams. They've said, make all of your exams open book, fine, but make sure that the students can't find the answers to these questions easily via Google search. And so, which brings us back again to how ChatGPT has now broken the strategy of using these high level uh, thinking questions and just blowing them out of the water.
Reading your article reminded me of at the height of the pandemic, students would kind of confide in me about different ways that other professors were giving them exams. And they did have a couple of professors who kind of said, all right, we're going to use kind of camera proctoring here, where you have to have your camera on and, we expect you to essentially, you've got to look. You've got to control your gestures, control your eyes, all of that stuff. And the most common complaint that I had, or that I heard from my students, was that it just created additional anxiety for them because they thought, look, I'm not going to cheat. I don't want to, it's not worth getting caught, quite honestly. But at the same time, I'm very much worried that I'm going to be accused of cheating
Mm.
because I look away, I look towards something, I do this or that. And I thought about that. I took that quite, literally. And I thought maybe I would as well, actually. I might be in that group that sometimes, when I'm thinking, even on the podcast here, I'll look up, I'll look around, try to get a different environment, something else in my view. And I thought, well, what would be, even if I successfully told my teacher I wasn't cheating, there would still always be that broken moment where I thought, do they think I'm cheating now? Are they classifying me as a cheater? And how it's just too easy to kind of ruin that relationship there. And so I actually appreciate the fact that in your study you brought up the concern about camera proctoring, which is limited in some sense in what it can and can't do.
I completely agree. And so, what do we do about it? What are the solutions going forward? And this is a great big question that we're all faced with, because I don't think we have simple solutions to this question. We've been having discussion for here at my institution in terms of what do we do? How do we address the integrity problems with exams? And a lot of voices that I'm hearing are saying, you know, we're not going back to paper and pen type exams, as if that is a step backwards, as if that is kind of a regression. And I think it's a little bit of an unfortunate way of seeing things because, I don't know, call me old school, but there is something to be said about sitting down in the room with all the other students and 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 being evaluated in that kind of a context. I don't necessarily think that this is a step backwards. I see it as an improvement, a step forwards, a return to common sense. What else can we do? One of the things I'm trying to do, and I'm facing a lot of pushback at my institution, is looking at oral exams. This is something we haven't done for a very, very long time. Um, I remember I had only one oral exam when I was a student in German, and it made sense to do it, I guess. But we just don't have courses that use oral exams, and why not? I'm thinking of my students who are going to be graduating to be data scientists, computer scientists. How are their employers going to evaluate their abilities? Through an oral test. You sit down with the person who is thinking of employing you, and you have a discussion. And they're testing you out. You're testing them out as well if you want to work there. It's essentially an oral exam. Plus, there are other technical exams that you necessarily have to go through. But why is this unsuitable? And so it's a conversation. It's a robust conversation I'm having here. I don't feel as though I'm winning, but in a 5-10 minute conversation with our students, I think we can figure out very, very quickly what they know and what they don't know.
I agree, and specifically in computer science too. What's fascinating about that is so much of what you're trying to do is problem solve and critically think in the moment. Because there are at times there are efficient ways to program something utilizing memory efficiently, all of that. And there are also some times though when you're trying to stretch a little bit and trying to figure out, okay, so what are a couple of different ways that I can try this so that I can maybe find the most efficient, find inefficient, or somewhere in between. And having those oral conversations with the students allows them to show you in real time their thinking. What's the process, right? Because even if let's say you're having this conversation with a student, and it doesn't even have to be just be in computer science, you can have it in just about any field, this kind of conversation where you have the student walk through their thoughts even if at the end they don't necessarily get to the answer. For me, the beautiful part is to see, okay, I know how you got there though. And there's a lot of good in how you got there. I think eventually you would have seen that there's a problem, which is just as important. That's important to be able to see that. But I love how you arrived at that thought at the end. And so, like you, I think there is a tremendous amount of value in maybe bringing back to a degree a kind of oral examination that doesn't have to be necessarily about the answer. It can just be about, let's showcase, how are you thinking? How are you thinking about this issue, right? Because I thought about this specifically in terms of the infamous the when you're having an online interview in computer science and you have to do a coding example, right? So now you can just plug in the problem into ChatGPT and it will print out the most beautiful code you've ever seen, in any language. And so it made me wonder, so what's the value then necessarily of the coding? It seems to me it's more valuable now. Can we get to the thinking? Can you think about what even to put into Chat GPT at this point? But I wanted to ask you about that as someone who's a professional in this field. Has this in some way changed even how you look at the value of the code itself?
So a couple of things. I think that issue that you kind of raised is the debate that is kind of raging between formative and summative assessments, whether or not most of our assessments should be practical, and in the context of computer science, programming based, solving real world problems, or whether or not some of them should be summative in terms of trying to figure out in a constrained, more narrow context, what does a student understand in terms of theory? And I think we need both. I think being able to solve a problem practically and demonstrate that through those kinds of assessment is crucial. But being able to, like you said, explain and demonstrate um, to the examiner your thinking process, your problem solving process is absolutely crucial. And I think that can only be done through these kinds of contexts of oral exams, perhaps in a written exam to some degree as well, but it's crucial. To your question about programming and how we can use ChatGPT in terms of um, maybe co-piloting or engineering it better to give us the code that we need. I think this is the exact this is the new field I've kind of been thinking about that is about to emerge. That's about to explode. And if we think about programming, programming has come a long way since 50s, 60s, where we had punch cards, and then we went into assembly, and then we went into COBOL, Fortran, and different kinds of programming languages that are quite high level at the moment, like Python. I think we're possibly about to enter a different programming paradigm now, where it's going to be about prompt engineering, where it's going to be about how can you intelligently describe the problem that you need solved to these large language models for them to generate computer code that you need. The field that I'm kind of looking at and seeing whether or not there is scope for further research, and I'm sure there is also how can we teach these large language models on the fly? So, for example, one of the limitations that I found with the critical thinking abilities of large language models at the moment is if I take text A and I take text B and I ask it, can you look at both these texts, synthesize them, and somehow put them together intelligently? Can you do this? And I found that large language models struggle to do that. They struggle, at least at the moment, with the kinds of prompts that I have been giving them. But is it possible to teach large language models? You show them text A, you show them text B, and you show them the example of a synthesis between the two texts. And then you say, right, here's text 3, here's text 4. Now replicate this synthesis, this critical thinking. Can you do that? I have a feeling it might be able to do that. And the reason why I think that it might be able to do that is because ChatGPT has been trained on code, like you said, and it understands code really, really well. It's able to generate code that, like you said, is beautiful, it's perfect. In order for it to be able to do that, it needs to understand and reason extremely well. Code and understanding code is a highly, highly complex task. Therefore, I have a feeling that there's a part of its network architecture that is able to do high-level critical thinking that we're perhaps not accessing when it comes to language-based problems. It's able to do with code, doesn't seem to be able to do it quite with language. Are we able to express a language problem in the language of code? Can I take text A and say, hey, ChatGPT, imagine that this is actually code, represent it in your own thinking as code, take text B and pretend that this is code as well. Now, can you synthesize the two and give me a result? I'm not sure whether or not it's possible. So, keen to try that out because there's a
Hmm.
possibility we can tap into some capabilities of ChatGPT that we haven't yet discovered. The exciting thing is, even the designers, the guys that build ChatGPT, they don't actually quite understand what the full capabilities of this technology are. This is the exciting thing. They're still figuring out. They don't know why certain things work and why certain things don't work with ChatGPT. And so we're all going to be discovering its capabilities over the next little while. And this could be one of those things that we find that it can actually do. We just need to ask the right questions.
I'm going to ask a question that is going to be overly simplified, but um, I kind of want to just hear you say it. So you seem incredibly impressed by its ability to do the work that it does. Would you actually label it as a critical thinking entity?
If you'd asked me this question 2, 3 days ago, I probably would have said no. I probably would have said it's able to emulate critical thinking. It's able to demonstrate that critical thinking has taken place. But I wouldn't necessarily say that it has done critical thinking. I wouldn't necessarily have said, oh, um, it has the ability to reason and understand concepts to such a degree that it's able to critically think. Um, just in the last couple of days or so, I've started reevaluating my position on this. And I'm thinking, well, there's an off chance, just an off chance, that perhaps it can do more than I initially thought that it can do. Um, Perhaps it's not just mimicking um, the behaviors that we would expect from critical thinking. Perhaps it is able to do it if we're able to ask it correctly. And I'm not too sure how we can yet. I think this is something we need to figure out. Can we teach it to critically think? Can we express our problems perhaps more programmatically in the way we communicate with it that would trigger part of its artificial brain in order to give us what we're after?
Well, the question that you fed it, and I'll read the question here because just so we all have an idea of what it is. You asked it, how would you suggest that students are prevented from using ChatGPT from cheating in online university exams? Which is a brilliant question to ask it. And essentially, it provided four approaches to take. The first one being plagiarism detection software, the second one being machine learning algorithms and natural language processing algorithms to detect suspicious answers. Third, it offered educating students about the ethical problems of using AI to generate answers, which I think is fascinating. And then finally, it said we can use AI to better secure the exam platforms. Now, in your article, though, you seemed to me to be quite skeptical of implementing these answers. And some of them we might have touched upon a little bit. But if you don't mind, I'd actually like to approach these a little more specifically because I think these are probably concerns that your average person has as well or might have thought of. Certainly, your average teacher will have come across many of these already. So, what are some of the potential problems that you found in terms of using plagiarism detection software?
So first of all, issue with plagiarism is that plagiarism will be detected, obviously, if the text strongly resembles another text that is found within a database of Turnitin, let's say. The thing with ChatGPT is that it's able to generate, not able to, it does generate different responses based on the same inputs. So you can ask it the same question and it will give you a different answer each time you ask it. So that means plagiarism cannot be detected. Now, of course, the answers will have some overlaps, but the answers will be expressed differently. So it won't necessarily be completely picked up as plagiarism. So that's the first issue. The second one is being able to detect whether or not the text has been generated by AI or not. It's a reasonable suggestion, but it's actually unworkable. It's very easy to bypass it. So, for example, people are saying, "Oh, it's possible now to embed a watermark within AI generated text, and this watermark can be picked up." So, what is this watermark? This watermark is essentially a statistical number. It's a probability. It's a probability that a sequence of words that the AI agent has generated are plausible. That means that those are the most likeliest words to be generated by AI based on everything that it's learned. Now, it's very easy to break this. It's very easy to even get ChatGPT to generate text that won't be picked up by AI text detectors. So I did a little bit of an experiment, and there are two parameters within language models that you can tweak. One is called perplexity, What perplexity measures is how rare a word is. So if you ask ChatGPT, generate a piece of text that has a high level of perplexity, that means when it's generating words, it will choose words that are rare. And then the other parameter that you can ask it to do is burstiness. So that means if it's set a very high level, that means that it's going to select lots of rare words in a short space of time. So if you have a text that uses rare words and they're quite closely put together, then this text is not going to be detected as an AI generated text. And I can give you an example if you like. I can actually I prepared a little snippet of code that I've asked ChatGPT to generate based on its default setting, as well as based on high levels of burstiness and high levels of perplexity. So here's an example. I asked ChatGPT, write a brief paragraph on the keto diet. And it says, this is its default setting. The ketogenic diet, commonly known as the keto diet, is a low carbohydrate, high fat diet that aims to promote weight loss and improve overall health. The idea behind the diet is to reduce carbohydrate intake to a minimal level, causing the body to shift its primary energy source from glucose to ketones produced from fat. The shift into metabolic state called ketosis is believed to result in weight loss, improved insulin sensitivity, and reduced inflammation. Fantastically written. But if you take that text and you put it into an AI detector, this comes up as 97% AI generated. So I asked it next, rewrite this text with a highest level of perplexity and burstiness, which is a great word. And this is what it said. The ketogenic regimen, frequently referred to as the keto diet, is a dietary approach characterized by restriction of carbohydrates and an emphasis on fat consumption, with the purpose of catalyzing weight reduction and enhancing general well-being. The philosophy of the diet entails a drastic reduction of carbohydrate intake, which in turn instigates the body's energy system to transition from glucose reliance to ketones generated from fats, and goes on like this. Now, I copied this text and put it into a detector, and it came up as 99% human. So we've broken the watermark, and ChatGPT
Yeah.
broke the watermark uh, itself as well. But there are also other tools like Quillbot where you can take text such as this. You can paste it in there and you ask it to rehash the text a little bit, and it will come back with almost perfect percentage mark of human generated text as well. So this is why this strategy doesn't actually work.
Yeah, and just to add on to that too, right? We have to be careful. We started having this conversation as well a couple of weeks ago in terms of our writing program, trying to figure out a way that we want to approach this. And some of the initial conversations we had, some of us were trying to say, listen, don't fall in love with just Chat GPT. Because the truth is, you have to think about the technology itself, not just the name, right? Because the technology, in some senses, kind of always going to be around now, and it's been around in the past. It just maybe not to this level, and so it's not something I think that we can necessarily control as much as we have to think about it. Kind of going back to the beginning of this conversation, trying to think about it as a tool. How can we use it with us in some sense? And that maybe we'll jump down because with that second problem that I mentioned about machine learning algorithms, you kind of answered both of those in that response. Um, so let me ask you about that third one then, educating students about the ethical problems of using AI. Have you thought really carefully or given that suggestion much thought since your study?
A little bit. I felt as though that my literature review kind of answered that question in actual fact. We've got studies that have investigated using honor codes, using education as a tool to dissuade students from cheating. And it hasn't worked. It hasn't shifted the needle one ounce. And this is a strategy that I'm hearing from the administrators at my end as well, that we simply need to educate the students better about cheating. And I'm not convinced. I don't think education is going to change things at all. I think it comes down to character. It comes down to virtue. What are you aiming for as a person? I don't think any amount of education is about how bad cheating is going to change things. Um, if a student believes that the goal is just to get ahead, just to get the best mark possible, make the greatest short-term gains as possible, it doesn't matter what you tell them about cheating, is not going to change things at all. So I'm skeptical.
Yeah, I can't blame you, because in some sense you can try to say, well, maybe we should be strengthening philosophy, right? Philosophy departments, and maybe thinking about having more discussions in philosophy about the ethics of technology moving forward. But that being said, I think you're right. I'm not so sure that in the moment, that philosophy is going to be the thing that comes to their minds. In my classroom, we what I try to instill within them is that the one thing that they have, these students, each one, is that they are unique to this world. They're unique to it, which means that their choices that they make, what they decide that they're going to put out into the world, in some sense, really is connected to them. And so the question for my students always is that what you want to be connected to you? Do you want that text that was produced by ChatGPT to be the thing that represents who you are? Now, I don't know if that makes a dent, if it makes a difference, but I know at least at the beginning of the semester, when I have some students who are always worried about, oh, you're going to try to make us all into like 20 versions of you. But I always tell them the world does not need 20 more versions of me. It needs one of me and one of each of you. And I try to sell them truly on that idea that you are unique. You only have so much time here, like anyone else. And so you've got to think about what you put out into that world. And that includes on your social media, by the way, the same thing. And so it might be that at some point we could get to a place where they look at this and say, well, I would rather represent myself than to have, AI represent me. But like you, I'm skeptical of in that moment when they're anxious and they're worried about this and that. It's so easy to put the text or the questions in chat gpt, and it just produces such beautiful text. It really does. I'm not so sure that you know educating students on the ethical problems, of which, by the way, they know. Let's not pretend to like they don't know what cheating is. They know what it is.
Of course they do.
So I was like you, a little bit skeptical of that. I kind of laughed a little bit when I saw that response that was generated about educating the students. Um, so then how about that the last one, which you kind of touched upon as well? Is there a space for asking ChatGPT, okay, how would you secure these exam platforms?
I don't think ChatGPT would have a solution for this, apart from a generic answer, use AI. Well, what does a solution like that actually look like? Um, I don't think that there's anything out there at the moment unless somebody invents it. So I don't think it can actually help us. I think it just kind of threw that out there to fill in the gap, but I don't think it's an intelligent, suggestion, to be honest with you. Um, Look, one thing I kind of wanted to circle back to and return to what you were saying about education and teaching ethics, which I think is fantastic. I would love to hear how that works out with your class. But one thing that I was a little bit, I guess, disappointed about is hearing at our end some of the conversations around how we respond to this new threat to the integrity of exams. Is it was kind of thrown back at us as academics. We were kind of challenged to ask ourselves, how are we contributing to the cheating? And I wasn't all that pleased with that line of thinking, because it seemed to be quite prevalent amongst the group, in terms of, um, how are we responsible for the actions that the students are taking, which are unethical. And so I think as long as this kind of an attitude is the prevailing attitude, I don't see us coming up with solutions that actually work,
Hmm.
because I'm not too sure how we can act differently in order to um, change the behavior of the students. If they're dead set on cheating, well, doesn't matter how good my content is, doesn't matter how inspiring the lectures are, um, doesn't matter how much you prepare the students for the exam. If they're intent on cheating, they will. So that was the other issue that I found a little bit uncomfortable, but I think we're all going to be facing this same issue around the world in different institutions.
I agree. And actually, I've never told this story before on the show, but it's one of my favorite stories from education. When I was doing my certification to teach secondary English in New York State. I took an education course with a nun who was 87 at the time. World of experience. And on the first or second day of class for us, she said something that changed my life and how I look at teaching, and I still have it today. She said to us, "Look, if you cheat on an exam and you get away with it in this class, that's on you. That's not on me. And maybe you're okay with living with that, and if so, that's also on you. It's not on me. And so if you get away with cheating in this class, you're going to have to live with that, not me." And I thought, "Oh my god, she's right." Like, she's right, actually. And so, like you, when it came to the discussion of the cheating online, I understand having discussions about, well, let's think about maybe how we can approach our exams differently. That makes sense. But there were so many teachers who genuinely broke down because they thought, I just learned from one of my students that there's rampant cheating going on in my online exam. And I felt really bad for those teachers because how much can we really change? How much could we have, especially during the pandemic at its height? How much more could we have done other than to literally ask the students, please don't? I mean, there definitely is this, there has to be this moment when that shift in culture has to come on the other end, and it has to be more about the students realizing, look, it actually does matter if you cheat, and you're going to have to live with that, and that's on you. Not necessarily on us completely. It just isn't.
That's well said. I was listening to some comments. I was reading, I think it was reading comments from some students about them saying how we fooled the prof, we fooled the professor, we cheated
Yeah.
and we're able to get by using ChatGPT. And I was thinking, you didn't fool anybody but yourself. And I
Yeah.
think it's very sad, because I think a lot of us can actually tell when the responses are not coming from our students. We may not have the evidence to do something about it, but we kind of know deep down this doesn't quite correlate with what the student has previously produced. It doesn't even correlate with the previous responses in an exam that they've given, that there's a disconnect. So we're not fooled. And like you said, it's something that they have to carry. They end up cheating themselves, sadly enough. Um, and it affects the character. They do have to live with that for the rest of their lives. The qualification that they've earned, they'll always know that it's slightly tainted, and that's sad. So agree
Yeah.
with you.
So you've let's fast forward a little bit. You complete your study, you're about to hit the submit button to put that article in for review. What were your conclusions at that time about all of this? What did you kind of put together at the end as you're just about to hit submit for this article?
Well, my thoughts were we can't fight against this technology. I don't think the solution is to try and shut it down. My thoughts are how can we fully embrace and work with this technology in order to make our education even better? And that's where my thinking was heading, because I think that is the solution. The genie's out of the bottle. It's not going back in, and ChatGPT is not going to be the only technology of this kind that's going to emerge. Others are coming out as well. How do we work in a context of this phenomenal technology in order to equip our students for the future, for the job market, which is about to be seriously, I think, dislocated? There are going to be disruptions. And how can they use this technology in combination with what we teach them in order to do what they need to do even better? And I don't have a solution for that. I think we're going to have courses on how to use ChatGPT in order to maximize the value of whatever subject you're in. We're going to have to bring that in. But we're in for a bit of a shock, a bit of a bumpy ride, I think, over the next few years. I think we're entering a golden age in AI. I think it's incredibly exciting. Um, I have a little bit of nervousness as well. What this means for all of us, I have to say, a lot of our industries, particularly education, is going to be really, really affected by this. So we're all going to have to be a lot more agile, but there's no going back now. There's no going back. This is a watershed moment, I think.
I agree. And I'm not sure that we even have um, our thoughts in order with the proper questions to even know where it's going to go, which is kind of what I was telling you before we started, recording this, was that what I appreciated about having your article there was that it helped formulate questions for me that I could then bring to my colleagues even to sort of ask. And we still have a long way to go in terms of trying to formulate what are the proper questions for us to have. You you kind of answered one of my questions here toward the end, which was about, and I'm not sure if it's a fair question, but maybe I'll try to ask it anyway in some sense. Let's put aside, if we can, for the moment, Teo, the researcher, teacher, and let's just ask you, the human being. Are you are you excited by the possibilities of AI moving forward? Are you um, wary? Are you kind of nervous or anxious about it, or are you, do you have a positive outlook on the future of AI beyond even just Chat GPT?
50-50, to be honest with you, would be my response.
Hmm.
I have to say, my first interaction with ChatGPT left me elated, absolutely thrilled. I was bouncing off the walls, and I just couldn't stop chirping in the ear of my wife about ChatGPT. She had enough of it. But at the same time, I could see that there is a lot to be nervous about. Now, I don't want to say that I'm nervous about super intelligence emerging and the artificial general intelligence and machines taking over. That's not really what concerns me. It's it is about the disruption to our lives that is around the corner that's going to happen. Commentators are talking about we're entering an age of transformative AI. And I have no doubt that they're correct about this. Every industry is going to be disrupted. Um, People will lose their jobs. New jobs will hopefully be created at the same time. But things are going to profoundly change. Um, I think about my three daughters. They're fairly young, and I kind of think, what kind of a world are they going to be entering? By the time you know, they reach early adulthood. What kinds of careers do I need to start? Do I need to start? Can I start encouraging them towards? And what kinds of skills will they need to have? These things do cause me a little bit of anxiety in terms of us and our profession. What is going to happen to education? I love my job. I really do love doing what I do. I want to continue to do it. But I can see that universities will begin to shut down. I can see how this technology can be used as a private tutor. It can bring you to knowledge so much faster. And I've felt this. I felt this myself. Just the other day, I had questions, detailed technical questions about how large language models work. Now, I could have spent days trawling through Google Scholar, looking at highly technical papers, very mathematical, to try and get to my answer. And I may not have arrived at it. Whereas I had a discussion with ChatGPT. Please tell me how this component works. Gave me an answer. Then I would have a follow-on question or give me an answer. And I was able to get to exactly the information that I needed. Save myself days. These are the kinds of things students can do as well. So this is hugely positive. On the other positive side is I'm thinking of my own productivity. Um, I started talking a little bit earlier on how it's kind of enables me to do tasks, admin tasks a little bit faster. You talked about how it enables you to write perhaps paragraphs or more on days when you feel a little bit rough around the edges and not that sharp. Um, I was thinking about this, and it feels a little bit like a performance enhancing drug because it's exactly like that. There are days when you have to write and you really can't string sentences together, and this really helps you. And I think it's a very useful tool that can be used with integrity. If you have something to say, if you have knowledge about a particular topic, and you need a little bit of assistance in expressing it, and it's fantastic. And for us, who are in the business of writing, um, I find it immensely useful. For me, I write mostly in academic style, which is sterile and dry and boring. And so language for me is not an art. I don't care so much about words. I care about being able to express what I've done. And so for me, this is like having a research assistant next to me the whole time. It's hugely beneficial, I have to say.
I think that's actually, because I like to try to end on positive notes if I can always, and I think you pretty much nailed the positive parts to this. There are definitely parts of this that we should be excited about. And I love the idea of what you just said about it's like having a research assistant. I never even thought of it that way, but you're 100% correct. It absolutely can help. And it can help in areas of education. It can help in areas where students don't have the resources maybe to help them in terms of private tutors and things like that. So all of this can really transform our societies in really positive ways. My only concern, because like you, I'm not really concerned so much about general artificial intelligence and a Terminator scenario of takeover. I am, however, and I always probably will be, a bit concerned about offloading thinking to something else, to the point that the human being, in some ways, loses a little bit of that ability to think like a human, meaning messiness.
Mm.
Sometimes that, sometimes, let's be honest, it's during those chaotic moments where you're writing, it's just not that great, that you also come across great ideas that you might not have come across before. So that would be my one concern here, is always thinking about that we can potentially fundamentally change how the human being thinks. And I'm not sure that's something that I think we need maybe to have more conversations about. But Teo, I can't thank you enough. Thank you so much for coming on with us and sharing this information. It really is amazing, and I absolutely would implore people to read your article to get an idea and a sense of maybe some of the questions that we should be thinking about. I really appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. It's been a pleasure.
Like any muscle in our bodies, the mind needs exercise. It needs to be tested, to be stretched, or else it atrophies. And that's my biggest concern with ChatGPT, that when we offload thinking to AI, we can lose the ability to think like humans. And I don't just mean think critically, I mean to think like humans. The muddiness, the complexity, the thoughts that seemingly go nowhere. These kind of thoughts are just as important to us as the beautifully manicured ones. And so, although I do see myriad ways for ChatGPT to be helpful in places where young people do not have the resources to hire a private tutor, I do hope that we do not lose the ability to think, as Spock would often remind Captain Kirk, illogically, like humans. Remember, if you want to support our mission to bring civil discourse back into the mainstream, hit the subscribe/follow button, leave a kind comment or rating, and consider sharing the show with a friend. Until next time, try to keep one foot firmly planted on neutral ground. And have a great day.